Hello, everybody, and welcome back to War for Cybertron and Fall Cybertron characters in TFP. We've made it to Season 3, now let's get started. We continue off where we left off with Megatron and Shockwave interacting, as that pretty much goes the exact same, but Megatron is less surprised that Shockwave was lied about being dead by Starscream. Shockwave explains what he's been doing on Cybertron, and he even tells him to come with him as he enters a laboratory and shows the Predicon in the test tube. Megatron smiles and says it is truly good to have him back, but then he calls up Slipstream and orders her and Skywarp to search with their Seekers to find Starscream or the Autobots, with the two Seekers agreeing. As Slipstream and Skywarp split up, they do communicate over cons, with Skywarp starting a conversation about how he isn't surprised that Thundercracker is with the Autobots, but he would have loved to have gotten a chance to face him during the battle for the Omega Keys. At the Harbinger, the Autobots are fully settled into the new base, with the new Autobots of Cybertron getting their Earth modes. Warpath scans a tank, Scattershot scans a military battle station jet type vehicle mode, Hound scans a military jeep, Chromia scans a motorcycle similar to RC, Firestar scans a sports car, Zoom scans a similar car to Jazz, and Scrounge scans an armored car, with the Autotroopers scanning the same type of vehicle modes the other Autotroopers have. Wheeljack, Bulkhead, and Springer are happy to see Warpath, a former wrecker, with Warpath saying he's missed kablamming Deceptichops with them. And other characters like the Dinobots team get to reunite as well. However, Thundercracker is still being chastised by some of the Autobots from Cybertron, with them not really fully liking him on their side. But Thundercracker, he accepts it, he understands why. But RC and Jazz tell him it will take time, but that at least the bots who've been on Earth the longest accept him, to which Thundercracker smiles, before walking over to Optimus. Optimus is about to leave when Thundercracker approaches, with Thundercracker saying he's been thinking since the battle, and how he doesn't know what to do, as the cons think he's an Autobot, and he's already helped the Autobots so much that he's conflicted on what to do. But Optimus says he's proven himself to be a great ally, and while he may say he's not ready to be an Autobot, deep down, it seems his spark wants to be one. Thundercracker thinks before deciding, as we see later, Thundercracker is equipped himself with new Autobot insignias on his wings, to which Optimus welcomes him to the Autobots, with the Earth Autobots happy for him, while the Cybertron Autobots are still not fully trusting of him, but they are willing to give him a chance, with Warpath even asking if he has any hard feelings about all those times he kablammed him back in the war, with Thundercracker saying no hard feelings. Later, Sideswipe has been buried, with a team of bots returning also from the old base with whatever was left behind, even having found the remains of the Star Saber and the last bit of red energon, which had only survived the explosion due to being stored in the lower levels. But there's only enough red energon for one dose, so it is kept in storage. Optimus is ready to leave, but before he does, he goes to where the original Optimus is kept. He briefly mourns over his fellow original self being dead, before he goes and takes the Matrix out of him, before putting it inside himself before leaving. Meanwhile, on Starscream's ship, Starscream is smiling as he looks at the Omega Keys, with him imagining himself as the reviver of Cybertron. But Knockout questions how they will even ever accomplish this. After all, they are low on numbers. But Starscream says he has that planned out. He just needs to wait for the right moment. Then his monitor detects something, a ship arriving to Earth. Slipstream and Skywarp meet up with their Seekers, having not found anything, but then the shadow of this new ship comes over them, with them shocked. Meanwhile, Megatron would be resupplying Shockwave's lab on Cybertron to keep the Predicon up and running, but then Slipstream would call in, asking for him to open a space bridge, to which Megatron does have it opened. Slipstream and Skywarp come through, and when Megs asks what they found, she says that they didn't find the Autobots or Starscream, but they did find someone's. as 3 Decepticons come through the portal: Molder Master, Scrapper, and Cyclonus. Megatron is surprised, but glad, as he asks where they've been. They explained how they left Cybertron to hunt for Autobots across the stars, and that a few years back one of their first prisoners had escaped, and they've been following the signal of the pod ever since, until they came here. Megatron puts 2 to 2 together that must have been Smokescreen, but he is happy to hear that they have came, so he welcomes them back to the Decepticons, and asks to be taken to their ship to look at it. With them putting the coordinates in, and they arrive, with Cyclonus welcoming him to their ship, the Dark Side. Megatron has a look at the crew of Decepticons that operate it: Wild Rider, Ravage, Ratbat, Hook, Scavenger, Longhaul, Mixmaster, Bone Crusher, Lugnut, Dirge, Ramjet, Rampage, Flame War, Slicer, Thundertron, and many Viacons. Megatron is very much happy with the reinforcements, but that's not all Cyclonus has for him. So they bring him to the prison brig and show him the many Autobot prisoners they have: Hotspot, Blades, Streetwise, Groove, First Aid, Blue Streak, Blaster, Ramhorn, Steeljaw, Eject, Rewind, Hotshot, Transmutate, Huffer, Fallback, Evac, Mirage, Sunder, Falcatron, Torque, and many Autotroopers. Megatron has an idea and says that they will make excellent slaves for the repairing of Cybertron, as he says he wants them taken to Kaon to begin rebuilding it, and to fortify Shockwave's base, while Shockwave creates the Predicon. Molder Master then comes up to Megs and asks if he knows the fate of the rest of his team, with Megs explaining the situation to them, to which Molder Master says he sees, and promises to destroy them upon their next meeting. Soon the new Decepticons reunite with their fellow brothers from Megatron's crew, such as Soundwave, who is glad to reunite with Ravage and Ratbat, and Frenzy as well is glad to reunite with them all, and they do explain Laserbeak and Rumble's death. Also, Barricade is pretty happy to see Slicer, since they did have a camaraderie back on Cybertron before the war. And also, by this point, the Decepticons that came from Cybertron have gotten their new vehicle modes. Onslaught has scanned an anti-aircraft truck, Brawl has scanned a tank, Swindle has scanned a Doom Buggy, Blastoff has scanned a jet, Vortex has scanned a battle helicopter. Upon seeing Silas, many of them are disgusted and say how dare an inferior creature take the form of one of them. But the other Decepticons say he's helped them, and thus he has a place amongst them. But some of the other Decepticons don't agree with this. Sometime later, Optimus returns to the Harbinger, having gotten a new paint job, which is a blue scheme similar to his 2007 Nightwatch Optimus toy. He tells all of his Autobots that since he is not the original Optimus, he thought a new look would signify this difference in leadership. To which all the Autobots like it, and say that they're sure that Optimus would be happy for him to choose his own identity, even if he is still trying to be like him. Then Ratchet says he's detected something. An Autobot vessel has arrived to Earth. Optimus gets in contact with it, and it is revealed to be Ultra Magnus' ship. But he isn't alone, as he has a few passengers: Cup, Trailbreaker, and Hot Rod. Magnus comments on Prime's new paint job, with Optimus saying that they will explain everything, and they will send a location for them to land. Magnus lands, and him, Trailbreaker, Cup, and Hot Rod arrive to the Harbinger, with Hot Rod glad to see Bumblebee since they were born via the last generation. Trailbreaker is happy to see Ratchet, since they have history of being some of the older bots around. And Cup is glad to see Springer, Wheeljack, Bulkhead, and Warpath, his fellow Wreckers, with Wheeljack saying, "It's good to see you, old Rusthead." But when Wheeljack sees Magnus, he is displeased at it. Magnus is glad to see Optimus, Grimlock, Ratchet, and Jazz, with them explain to his team what has happened on Earth, with Magnus shocked by Optimus here not being the original Prime, but he does accept this, with Optimus saying that most of him is still in there from the original Optimus. Then Magnus begins to explain himself that since he left Cybertron, he's been going around, finding some old friends, but often to see them fall to the Decepticons. But he was lucky to find Trailbreaker, Cup, and Hot Rod, with him even saying he's taken in Hot Rod as a member of the Wreckers. But when Optimus asks how they found their way here, Magnus says that's because they've been following a Decepticon prison ship full of other Autobots, and that it's made its way here. He then looks down for a bit before he apologizes to Optimus, as he says one of the Autobot teams that's on this ship was the Protectobots, who Elita 1 was in charge of. But when they were captured, the cons killed Elita 1. Optimus is shocked to hear this, with him mourning Elita, and saying he will make the Decepticons pay dearly for that, and they will free all those Autobots and stop the Decepticons at once. But Grimlock says they need to figure out a game plan before rushing in to free them, with Optimus arguing back, and this does start a mini argument. But Thundercracker stops them all and says that they need time to even think of going after them, as Starscream told him of this ship being run by Cyclonus before he left. And on that ship, Cyclonus has access to one of the most dangerous teams, the Constructicons. Bulkhead freezes at this, with him saying that he knows all too well of them. They tore through the gates of Thunderhead Pass as Devastator during the war, with them nearly winning the battle if it wasn't for Defensor. But a lot of wreckers like Moonracer, Rotorstorm, Leadfoot, and Iron Fist were lost in that battle. This causes the bots to stop arguing, with Optimus saying that they will figure out a plan to rescue them when that time comes, with Grimlock agreeing, and he says that he will make sure to lead that mission, given he has had enough experience dealing with prison breaks since being left on Cybertron. Him and his team did that a lot to free Autobots. Hot Rod, Cup, Trailbreaker, and Ultra Magnus later get new alternate modes. Ultra Magnus a semi-truck, Hot Rod a hot rod, Trailbreaker a truck, and then Cup is also a pickup truck. Meanwhile, at Kaon, Shockwave would finish his Predicon, with him showing it to the others, and that scene goes pretty similar to in canon, except Megatron isn't quite as shocked because he's already known about the Predicon. He would also mention that years ago, he sent many Predicons to distant planets like Earth to guard caches of Energon, but now they lie and rest. But he had them microchipped, so Megatron has the cons split up to find the bones of them. The Autobots would detect the cons splitting up across the world, so they decide now would not only be a good time to find out what the cons' next plan is, but to get the opportunity to mount an assault on the dark side to free the Autobot prisoners. So, the bots begin to split up, with a few going after the cons teams, and the rest going after the dark side, with Optimus saying coldly to not hold back, and that they will stop the Decepticons no matter what. The first bot team that goes after the first bone we see is Warpath, Scattershot, and Hound, with them fighting the cave opening, so they transform to drive in, but Scattershot can't fit, nor would his vehicle be able to access it, so he remains outside. Inside, we see Hardshell, Flame War, and the Insecticons mining the bone out, but when the Insecticon tries grabbing it, he is shot and killed by Warpath's tank barrel. Hound fights Flame War, while Warpath and Hardshell tango. The remaining Insecticons grab the bone and fly out, but would get picked off by Scattershot, with him getting the bone in the end. Hardshell and Flame War would retreat as the Autobots head home satisfied at their victory. Optimus Prime, Bumblebee, and Chromia make it to the second bone at the oil field, where they fight off the Viacons, including Thundertron. But then, they would see Shockwave, Soundwave, and Skywarp leaving the hole with the bone in hand. Skywarp distracts the Autobots while the other two get away, but they wouldn't get far, as they would begin to get shot at by Buzzsaw, with Sound Blaster ramming into Shockwave. Sound Blaster transforms and says he will have revenge for being left to rot, so he starts fighting Shockwave, with him having the advantage of having Soundwave's skills. Soundwave grabs the bone, but he is rammed into by Chromia. Thundertron sees Sound Blaster, and so runs into him, with them fighting as they fall off the bridge. Shockwave faces Optimus, with the two being pretty evenly matched. Bumblebee takes on Soundwave, with him managing to break a chunk off the bone, but before Soundwave can activate a space bridge to escape, Chromia knocks right into his back, with Bumblebee punching him in the face, not only cracking his visor, but knocking him out. Thundertron during the fight learns a lot about Sound Blaster's origin as they begin talking mid-fight, and so he then stops the fight, and says that he knows what it's like as he was a failed attempt to clone Alpha Trion back in the day, as Shockwave wanted to learn all he could of Alpha Trion's secrets. But when he failed as an experiment, he too was left to rot, and only joined Cyclonus' team to survive. But now that Shockwave is back, he doesn't want anything to do with him or the cons, so he offers that the two of them leave and start their own group, or at the very least get away from the cons. Sound Blaster thinks about it, and he sees Soundwave is knocked out and in the custody of the Autobots, so he agrees, with him calling Buzzsaw back, who actually has a piece of the bone. Thundertron says they will get revenge on Shockwave together as they leave. Shockwave and Skywarp retreat, with the bots taking a piece of the bone back, and the knocked out Soundwave. However, Optimus looks at Soundwave before pulling out his blaster and aiming it at him, but Chromia tells him to stop as he can provide information, to which Optimus looks at her for a bit before putting his blaster away and says coldly to head back to base, with Bumblebee and Chromia looking to each other in concern for Prime's action. Cup, Hot Rod, and Wheeljack arrive and Ultra Magnus' ship to the next bone. They sneak down the mountain with them taking down the Vehicons, but they hear a screech as a giant dragon flies down towards them. Before the mission, we see Megs had the Predicon go after the third bone to prove itself, with Slipstream, Dirge, Ramjet, and Slicer going with it. The Autobots try to fight off the Predicon but can't, so head into the cave, with it just small enough it can't follow them in. Cup tells Hot Rod to climb up and call for reinforcements, with the young bot protesting, but he listens, so he uses his flamethrowers to get leverage up and out. He gets to the ship, but he would face off against the Seekers, with Slipstream putting on the Apex armor. Hot Rod would make a comment about how if Slipstream wasn't an enemy, he would ask her out, but she is annoyed, so attacks. Cup and Wheeljack face off with the Predicon and Slicer, but Wheeljack pulls out his secret weapon, the last of the red energon, so he uses it to get some good hits on the Predicon in super speed, with it not being able to hit him, with Slicer trying to get hits on Wheeljack, but Cup fights him, as well as shooting at the Predicon. Eventually, the red energon runs out as Wheeljack throws a grenade at the beast's throat, but Slicer manages to slice it away, causing it to explode, collapsing the cave. Slipstream beats Smokescreen off the cliff, with him appearing to die, but before Slipstream can go down to finish him off, they hear the explosion, so the cons turn and check it out. The Predicon digs its way out, but then it sees the optic bone, and so has a flash of its past, and grabs it, and flies out, with Slicer assumed to be dead, so Slipstream, seeing a job done, flees with Dirge and Ramjet. Hot Rod awakens dazed, but he does go down to the cave and digs for the others, fighting Wheeljack fine, but Cup's legs and arms were blown off by the explosion, but he is alive, so they gather the parts, and the two get Cup out of there back to base. Sometime later, Knockout and Breakdown discover the location, and they hear something, so Breakdown breaks through the rocks, and they find Slicer. They decide to dig him out and bring him back to base. At the next bone, RC, Prowl, Springer, and some Autotroopers arrive, but they find themselves facing off Onslaught, Swindle, Brawl, Blastoff, Vortex, and Lugnut. Lugnut would say that they will destroy them for the grand and glorious Megatron. Springer, RC, and the Autotroopers fire at the Combaticons, while Prowl deals with Lugnut. Onslaught grows tired, so says for the Combaticons to merge into Bruticus, to which they do so, and they start to demolish the bots, with RC getting crushed by Bruticus, to which Springer is smacked into the ground. Prowl gets an idea, so he tricks Lugnut to activate the pulp, which causes an explosion that damages Bruticus, causing them to uncombine, and Prowl grabbing RC, who's still alive, and they call for a retreat. and they do so. To which Lugna claims victory, and the cons would get this bone. At the final bone, Zoom, Scrounge, Bulkhead, and some Autotroopers arrive. They see the museum, but then the building would blow up, as Silas, Motormaster, Wild Rider, Barricade Frenzy, and several mech drones come through, with the bone in hand. Bulkhead and the Autotroopers face Silas, Barricade, and Frenzy, while Zoom and Scrounge take on Motormaster, Wild Rider, and the mech drones, but they aren't doing so well. Bulkhead is knocked down, some of the Viacons are killed, Scrounge is also knocked down, while Zoom is killed. But a portal opens as Dead End and Dragstrip come through, and when they see Motormaster and Wild Rider, they tell them and the other cons to join them, as together they can revive Cybertron with the Omega Keys under Lord Starstream, and they even say, do they want to work with the one who lets a filthy human abomination roam amongst their ranks? Barricade, Frenzy, and Silas refuse, but Motormaster and Wild Rider look to each other before saying they're in, as Motormaster shoots Silas in the back, killing him. Barricade calls them traitors, but when they try to fight back, both are taken down by the Stunticons, with the mech drones killed as well. Motormaster grabs the bone, and him, Wild Rider, Dead End, and Dragstrip leave. Bulkhead, the Autotroopers, and Scrounge leave, sad about Zoom and the other Autotroopers' death, especially Zoom, since he was a kid. Barricade and Frenzy leave, reporting back everything that happened. And finally, as all these teams are going out, Ultra Magnus Grimlock takes the remaining Autobots to the dark side location, with them ground bridging onto it. They sneak around, but would run into another the Rampage, who would begin fighting them, while some of the Viacons alert the rest of the ship to the Autobots' arrival. Rampage is taken down easily by Grimlock, so they continue moving, but the Constructicons find them, and Scrapper gives the word, and they combine into Devastator. But Grimlock says they'll hold him off, so the Dinobots brawl with Devastator, 86 fashion. Megatron and the other Decepticons arrive, with Jazz, Ultra Magnus, and a few others holding them off, while the other bots get to the cell block. Trailbreaker leads them, and they arrive to the block. So, they begin freeing the Autobot prisoners. Hotspot asks how they found them, with Silverbolt saying they'll explain when they get out of here. But when the bots try to escape, more Decepticons start to arrive. But Silverbolt and the aerial bots combine into Superion and start wrecking through them. Jazz and Magnus meet up, with the rest having temporarily knocked down Megs' team. But Jazz says they should go to the Nemesis to retrieve some of the relics, with Magnus agreeing, so Blades transforms and brings Jazz to the Nemesis, which was next door at the moment. They enter and fight through the Viacons that still remain there, until they make it to the relics. Jazz only has enough room to grab one of the relics, but then he sees he can actually grab two, as he sees the phase shifter, so he grabs it, and then he sees the Forge, slinging it over his shoulder, and they make their escape. Kind of similar to Smokescreen and Cannon, but Blades is there. The Dinobots, once hearing the news, fall back, as the rest of the Autobots manage to escape, with some casualties, Torka, Sunder, and several Autotroopers. Megatron is enraged and calls for all of his forces to return, and he demands Shockwave to get work fast on the project. But at the Harbinger, Ultra Magnus' team arrives and sees the other bot teams. So Soundwave is placed into a cell until he's to be questioned when he wakes up. RC and Cup are heavily damaged, but are now under heavy medical attention. But Scattershot's team got all of their bone, while Optimus got a chunk of theirs. They find out their Predicon bones, with Wheeljack recalling that they were attacked by a Predicon at Scotland. Then Grimlock mentions from having fought a few of them created by Shockwave on Cybertron, and with Shockwave being back, they know he must be creating more of them, and now the cons have 2.5 pieces, while Starscream has 1. But Optimus says that even with that, they still succeeded in freeing many of their brothers, with him welcoming the freed Autobots to Team Prime, to which they are happy to all be together again. Hotshot is glad to see Boomby and Hot Rod, but when Optimus sees they got the Forge, he gets an idea, so he takes it and uses it to fix the Starsaber, repairing it to its full self once more. Ratchet comes to a conclusion that if they have Predacon bones, they can maybe create their own Predicon. But to even create one, he would need to use the proper test tube. Thundercracker mentions the protoforms, but Ratchet says that they require Energon to be turned into a clone, but they can't exactly do that with these bones since they have no Energon. Then Thundercracker mentions that when him and Arachnus scavenged the first half of the Harbinger, they found that there was a lab there. So they head there and see it has most of what they need. So Ratchet, First Aid, Raphael, and Thundercracker begin to work on it, with them using Shockwave's lab notes from their backdoor into the Nemesis to speed up the process. But due to their limited resources, they are unfortunately having to combine both bones just to create one Predicon. And Ratchet decides it would also be best to give it a consciousness so it can understand them, thus have a better chance to join their side instead of joining its fellow Predicons. Possibly. Sometime later, they finish up. So Optimus comes to the lab and watches as the Predicon is born. The Dinobots stand guard as it comes out of the tube, and it looks around, then at them. Optimus asks if the Predicon can understand them, with it saying yes, and it remembers a time from the far past of its past life, roaming this world with its brethren. Ratchet then asks if they have a name then. The Predicon goes quiet, then says, "My name is Skylynx." And that is where we're going to leave the story for now. Thank you all for watching. This was a really long part, but hey, we're halfway through Season 3 technically. Even though we're not. We still got I think 3 more parts left of this. Yeah. But yeah, the next part's going to get crazy, guys. This part was just a first step into the waters of what's going to change for Season 3. But yeah, see you guys in part 13.